So, as I've said, this is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on proceedings. The reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and streamed live, although there will be an interruption to that, which I'll explain in a moment. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the City Council's website. By choosing to attend tonight's meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds in the Guildhall, we must leave immediately. Please don't hang around collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So thank you for bearing with me for that. Just before we do go into the agenda, I've been asked to move an item, the final item, which is a presentation about cyber security. So in the original agenda, it's right at the end, but it's been suggested to me that we move it to after agenda item 5, which will make sense when you look at the agenda. That will mean that the meeting will no longer be public for that item because it relates to sensitive information that can't be disclosed to the public. So the meeting will not be public from agenda item 5 because we'll have a presentation that will take about half an hour and then the meeting will be public again. Okay. So again, thanks for bearing with me on that one. So agenda item 1, do we have any substitutes attending this evening? Thank you, Councillor Agar. Any declarations of interest that we need to be aware of? No, I've not been notified of anyone who wants to speak as a member of the public. So therefore we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 17th of June. So I'll just go through page by page in terms of accuracy and any matters arising. So page number 1, Councillor May, straight in there.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of corrections on page 1. So normally the present list would say who was substituting for who, and I think in this case it should say that Councillor Riaz was in place of Councillor Barnes. Also on page 1, I have a correction to the minutes for the correction of the previous minutes that are in the minutes, which was, it says that it was highlighted that Councillor Murray had been in attendance for Councillor Jagger, not Councillor Kinnersley as stated in the minutes. And what I actually said in that meeting was, at the June meeting, I said in the February meeting, Councillor Kimberley was in attendance in a place of Councillor Cookson. And then I have another one on page 4, but we'll wait till we get there. Thank you. I believe the sentence at the top of page 4 that currently reads, the committee did not identify any amendments to the plan. That's what it should say, and it currently reads the committee did not identify and amendments to the plan. So it should be an any there rather than and.
I just want to slightly steal their thunder a bit. So as a result of a recommendation that came from the corporate peer challenge, which showed Worcester City Council as absolutely dazzling, of course, as if we needed to be told that by someone external, a recommendation was made that the risk management comes under the remit of the Audit and Governance Committee, taken from the Policy and Resources Committee. So this is actually a new string to our bow. Again, within the peer challenge, it said the council would benefit from reviewing and strengthening its approach to risk. So it's not just for the sake of it, it's with a view to making sure that we have an even closer eye on risk management. For this item, we will be, as a committee, asked to approve the revised version of the risk management strategy and note the corporate risks as updated. So this isn't just for noting, we do have a job to do as such by approving. So without further ado, I'll ask a colleague to introduce the name of which I should have had at the tip of my tongue. It's yourself, excuse me.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, as the Chair has pointed out, the risk management strategy was something that corporate peer review did sort of pick up on, but when I did first start in February, it was something that we wanted to look at. So this agenda item, along with the item 12, which is on cyber security, sort of leaves you with three tasks really to look at. So we've revamped the risk management strategy. There was nothing wrong with the old one. It was perfectly functional, but there were perhaps a few things that were missing in the more robust strategies that are out there. So we can talk about the updated risk management strategy. And then we've actually got the corporate risk register. So instead of that going to P&R committee like it has done in the past, because this committee has the responsibility of looking after assurance, and you get updates from the head of internal audit and such like, it makes sense for you as this committee to see what's actually happening on that corporate risks and to see how we are trying to mitigate those. And then the last one, which is that private session, we've got Kerry Merchant, our head of IT, to give you an update on one of the actual corporate risks, which is cyber security, to give you more detail about how the council itself is managing that risk. So in terms of the risk management strategy, there in paragraph 3.1, we've highlighted some of the major changes that we've undertaken. So instead of just giving you a risk rating, on a 3-by-3 basis, so that's a rank of impact versus probability. We've actually extended that to 4-by-4, and we are looking at what is known as the gross risk, which, and this is quite, techie, could be quite boring really, but it's like sort of appreciating what that risk scoring is like before officers undertake any mitigating actions. So that's what the gross risk is. Then once you take into consideration the actions that everybody has in place, the training that might be going on, or the strategies or the policies, then that is what is defined as the net risk. So it's that sort of risk after that we are managing at this point in time. And then we've introduced the concept of target risk. So that's there in an ideal world, what would we like that risk factor to be if we had all the resources or all of the, the capability to implement those changes. So that's the risk score assessment. We've updated the roles and responsibilities so that as the corporate risks are the ones that we deem to be the highest importance for the council, each risk owner is either a member of CLT, our leadership team, or the next layer down as corporate management team. So there in 3.1 are some of the highlights of the changes that we've made in there. And then when we've looked at the actual risk register itself, we looked at what was presented last time to committee, and we've looked at, are they still fit for purpose? Are they still deemed to be the corporate risks? And we've rebadged some of them, renamed some of them, merged a few of them, and also said that some of them are actually service risks and should be managed at the service level rather than being escalated up at this corporate level. So those are the changes that are summarised in the table on page 7 of this agenda item. And we've also added 6 new corporate risks that are detailed there. And then if you move into the later appendix, we've actually got a set of slides which take each of the corporate risks and give you a bit of an update on what is the actual risk that we're trying to articulate, what are we doing as officers to try and mitigate that risk, and is there any update that we can give. Now, in some of those updates, Chris and his team have done a recent internal audit, so we might refer to that, or there might be something that might be happening nationally that we are trying to give you a bit of an update to. So that's all of the slides that are there as well. And I'll let Kerry talk about cyber later when we're in private session, but at the moment, if there are any queries on any of that, please feel free to ask. Thanks.
Is that still working? Yeah. Thank you very much, Rachel. Yes, we'll open up for discussion. Like I said, we have a decision to make, and we're referring to the cover report, Appendix 1, Corporate Risk Report, and Appendix 2, Risk Management Strategy. So, Councillor Sarah, I'll just see if any other shows have. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies if what I'm going to ask actually sits with a different report that we will eventually get, because I haven't regularly been on P&R. I don't know if something comes through operational. But another part of this agenda covers disaster recovery and the way in which, you would practice really for getting back on your feet. So particularly in relation to the cyber elements, is that something that we would want to draw out here at this level, even as a statement to say we will regularly run disaster recovery trials, or does that actually sit somewhere else?
I think there's probably a link, one on cyber, which I'll let Kerry talk about at the next agenda item, so that we don't delve into things that need to be kept private. But I think in terms of any like flood recovery or other things like that, we do have a corporate risk that's here, which is about emergency planning and business continuity. So sometimes there are national exercises that go on, and at the moment there's actually a national exercise that some officers across the council are taking part in. So that sort of tests what you would do in a scenario. So there's all sorts of levels of trying to test the what-if situation. David Sutton's team look at business continuity plans as well, and all members of CMT are there to update their plan and sort of have oversight of them, just to make sure that there's no gaps. Wherever possible that there are no gaps, but you can't always foresee everything that might happen. But that's certainly that's there in terms of what we do as a team.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Sarah again.
Thanks. So some time ago we talked about this risk register, updating it, and there was discussion that we might have some sort of workshop around building that new view. So obviously this has come out without that, unless it happened when I didn't know about it. Is there still a plan to do that, I guess, is my question, and maybe it fleshes out some of the detail in the headlines, and it's a different point, but I just wondered.
Certainly as officers, we've had a workshop in terms of getting it to this point, and then this is our recommendation, and then this is what we perceive to be the corporate risks and the ratings. Because we have moved to a 4x4 model, that I suppose there's a bit of judgment to be made sure that all of us are rating them in the same sort of way, like you would do a score, like is somebody 7 out of 10, or somebody always marks more harshly 5 out of 10. But then this is about us bringing it to this committee for councillors to challenge, observe, comment, and if there are areas that you think that should be on this risk register, then we'll take it away. If there's things that you want to know more about, a bit like what we're doing today with the cyber security, any of these corporate risks, we're happy to give you like another private session that talks about that particular risk in more detail, if that would help. But this is that start of, this is what the corporate leadership team believe to be the corporate risks for the city.
So that there won't be a workshop that members would be involved in then, I think what you're saying.
That's right.
I think that is a shame.
I've got my own comments to make, but on the point of what Councillor Sayer has just suggested about a workshop so that members can understand risk in more detail, I'm seeking advice here. Does it go to a vote at this committee whether we should mandate a workshop to be laid on for members, or is it a simple behind closed doors, can we have one?
I suppose it's what the purpose of you want from that workshop. If it's about understanding risk in more detail, or is it putting your own thoughts through about what should be risk, then there's no reason why you can't suggest X category now should be a corporate risk. So we're happy to facilitate a workshop or training or whatever it might be, but it's just not being really sure of what we understand the purpose, the outcome that you'd expect.
So if I may, we're being asked to sign off this as responsible people, and I think having a wider view amongst the members would be really helpful to back that up. That's the purpose of it. It might result in a combination of new risks being added or clarifications. I don't know. I can't predict what would happen, but whenever I've been involved in them in the past, and I have been, they're always valuable.
We could certainly put on something like we did with Treasury, and back in February, March time, I think we might have done some training to committee members at that point. So it was an informal, private thing, and we can pull some slides together with some examples about good best practice.
Sorry, I really mean having a session. The training is one thing, but to actually have the members properly contribute. I mean, maybe the room needs to decide whether it's just me that thinks this will be valuable, and if so, I'll be quiet. But I think it might be.
So is it semantics about a session and training? I mean, we're talking about our discussion amongst members so that they can really get their heads around.
Contribute.
Yeah.
I don't think that's training.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's just me. Yeah, it's about question and answer and having dialogue, so that's just the use of my words.
Well, I'm speaking for myself, for not the committee. I'm all for it, because I agree. This is part of our remit to make decisions on risk management, and it's brand new for this committee. And personally, I would value a session where I can learn from others and ask questions purely focused on this as an item. So I'm all for it. Perhaps with officers we can get a date in the diary. Is that right? Yeah. Councillor Barnes?
I completely agree with Councillor De Serra about this, because it is new to our committee and we've got to get up to speed pretty quickly. Also, the world is changing quite fast at the moment, and we may need to look at new trends that could become risk factors in the future, or significantly change some risk factors. I'm thinking about health and safety, which is now encompassing lone working. With the situation that is appearing on our streets, maybe we need to give that a bit more focus, amongst other things.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I think the fact that we're going to have a presentation on cybersecurity is perhaps a reflection of what you've just said about the changing landscape. I think arguably the cybersecurity is kind of the beginning of the session, really, because it's a deep dive into one risk factor. Cool. Any other questions, comments before I round up? Yeah. Councillor Agar?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I would say we are an organisation who under a certain amount of stress at the moment as things change rapidly. And I'm pleased to see the concern for staff welfare, because I think there's a certain amount of stretch working that's been involved. And I mean, that can cause a lot of stress anyway, can't it? Until everybody gets used to whatever roles they've got. Because I think there are staff who are working across more than one role, or in roles that they have not perhaps been used to working in. So I was pleased to see the concern for staff welfare and so forth. I think that's going to be important as we go forward. And I note that, that will be discussed in November at the staff conference. So I hope that people will feel free to say what they think at that point. The other thing I wanted to really say was, with another hat on, I'm the Armed Forces Veterans Champion. So we will next year get new duties in relation to our Armed Forces veterans, and we'll need to get trained up to deal with them quite quickly. I believe the County Council will be, or the Covenant has said that they will be providing training sessions next year in relation to those duties, so we're going to need to get up to date with those.
Thank you, Councillor Agar. Any further comments, questions? You actually raised one that I was going to mention about staff resilience. So, whilst it was quite, because of the context of uncertainty, local government reorganisation, it was quite grim reading. It was good that it was being acknowledged as a risk, because it's like the elephant in the room, isn't it? I mean, we're trying to run a council and people are worried about their livelihoods, so it is a risk to continuity. So don't want to read it, but it makes a lot of sense to be included within a risk management report. I was going to ask a question, I don't know if it's for you, Rachel or Sian, about page 15 of the corporate risk report, about inadequate governance and failure to ensure legal compliance. Have I got the right appendix? Page 25, is it? It's, yeah, hang on, it's corporate risk report, yeah, page, not climate, yeah, page 15 on the PDF, inadequate governance and failure to ensure legal compliance. There's a couple of blank boxes, so just wondered, what the mitigating actions would be for that particular risk factor.
Through you, Chair, forgive me for the blank boxes. We can address that, obviously, before we adopt this final version. The mitigating actions are largely the same every year, and we report them in our annual governance statement. So, for example, it's about how we're set up in terms of making sure that we have statutory officers in place, that we're making sure that we have trained professional staff supporting those statutory officers in those key legal and finance roles, that we operate the committee system of governance according to our constitution and our scheme of delegation, and that we're very clear what responsibilities sit with members, what sit with officers, that we follow there's a golden triangle of advice in terms of the 3 statutory posts, section 151, monitoring officer and head of paid service, and it's best practice in our sector that those 3 posts sit in the leadership decision-making process every week, and of course that does happen at Worcester City Council. Other mitigating actions are to expose ourselves to external scrutiny, whether that be through external audit or a peer assessment, for example. Mitigating actions include having a risk register and a functioning audit committee and so forth. So we will populate those boxes and give you that assurance, Chair.
So yeah, I'm very impressed that you can just rattle off a detailed list like that, and from sitting here, it's very beneficial for me as a person, but it's whether the committee is reassured by that verbal assurance in order to agree to pass this, because it's not in the documentation as it stands. So I'm going to ask the question of the committee: are you satisfied with the verbal account of the mitigating actions? I personally am, although of course I want them to be as soon as possible added to what we're looking at here. But for the time being, for the purpose of agreeing this, are you happy with the verbal inclusion of those mitigating circumstances? And then they'll be put in at a later date, maybe even later this evening. I don't know, a bit of pressure.
As it's going to be minuted, I think I don't have a problem with it. Sian's been very clear in what she's added, so as long as it's minuted carefully, I'm quite satisfied.
I was hoping you would say that, because I didn't want to park this, because there's a busy agenda as it is. Is everyone else happy with Councillor Barnes' suggestion? Yep. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so as I said, we've been asked to approve the revised risk management strategy and, as we've just discussed, note the updated assessment of corporate risks at the end of Q2, as shown in the corporate risk report. So we're approving 2 documents there. So all those in favour of approving with the proviso we've just discussed. Yeah. Thank you. That's carried. And thank you, Rachel, for the report, and Sean as well. So we're going to go into private session now because we have a presentation on cybersecurity. So apologies to the hordes of people watching this meeting avidly, but we're going to switch off the camera and resume as a public meeting in about half an hour, hopefully. Thank you, Julian. Welcome back, everyone. So we're back in public session, and we're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the Auditor's Value for Money report. And I believe Rachel's going to introduce this and hand over to Karen.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this is a report that is been prepared by ASET, so I'll let Karen come in and give you the background to that, and then the recommendations that Karen and her team have identified, I can give you a bit more detail about our management response to those. So over to you.
Thank you, everyone. So in front of you tonight, you have our Auditor's Annual Report, which is a summary of the position to date on our 24-25 audit of the Council. It is slightly different to what you would have received in previous years because we are now following a new Code of Audit Practice, which from 24-25 requires us to issue a draft annual auditor's annual report to those charged with governance by the 30th of November each year. Hence why we are presenting that to you this evening. The code does note that this includes even where we haven't completed or concluded on the audit of the statement of accounts. So I think that's quite important context as to why you are receiving this report tonight. As I've just noted, the audit of the statement of accounts is still ongoing, so we will be coming to you at a later committee with our audit findings report, which includes the work that we've done and our opinion on those accounts. This report therefore includes the work that we have done on our value for money responsibilities. I would again caveat it that if we identify anything through the ongoing work on the statement of accounts that impacts on our conclusions and findings in relation to value for money, we will update our audit findings report, potentially update our opinion, and we may reissue this report at that point in time as well. So this report, as I say, summarises the work that we've done on value for money, and we consider value for money on over 3 areas: financial sustainability, governance, and improving or securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness, in effect value for money in the use of your resources. We are required to report to you if we've identified any significant weaknesses in those arrangements, and I'm pleased to report, based on the work that we've done to date, we haven't identified any significant weaknesses. If we had, we would follow up with key recommendations for the Council, and again, because we haven't identified any significant weaknesses, we haven't identified any key recommendations in the report. We have, however, identified other recommendations within this report, and those recommendations are not linked to significant weaknesses. They're areas for improvement that the Council may wish to consider in developing its value for money arrangements. Those recommendations are provided in the context of two areas that we see and actually are identified in your risk register, which has been discussed this evening, and are put in a national context as well, that many local government bodies across England are facing, and that is around about financial sustainability and the challenging finance position that you're facing. And the other area is local government reorganisation and devolution. And the recommendations that we have presented in our report are linked to those two key areas, and what information is being provided to members and committees to allow them to have all the information that you need in terms of this, I would say, challenging and uncertain time in terms of where you're taking decisions. That was really all I wanted to say on the report. I am obviously happy to take any any questions on it. And as Rachel has said, she will go into detail in terms of the management response to those recommendations.
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Okay, so as Karen said, that there's 3 recommendations there, and in the actual report, due to the publication timing and everything at the time, all we were able to say was noted and accepted. But working, you know, with Sean and the rest of the CLT and finance, we'll get something that's a little bit more sort of in detail. But in terms of the capital programme, that's work that we've already sort of undertaken with Cathy and the team. We recognise it's really important to make sure that our forecasts on what we think we will spend on our capital projects are up to date and as robust, because they have an impact on our cash flow and ultimately our borrowing. So there's real finance implications on that. And I think that it's definitely something that we can improve upon. It is all about just dialogue and having that sort of finance person talking to the project manager or the budget holder. And, you know, we're not about taking money off people if they say that they can't spend it in time. It's about being realistic and making sure that we've got that plan. But due to, you know, there's been quite a few changes in the finance team over the last sort of 18 months. So it's one of those things that sort of just slipped off the radar. But I do think capital slippage is something that a lot of local authorities have as an issue that they need to address. So that's something that we're already aware of, and, you know, trying to put things in place to improve on. The other 2 items are specifically linked to local government reorganisation. And I suppose at the moment it's a little bit early to know the full impact, to be able to actually sort of make recommendations that if you go down this decision, it will have this impact in the future. But certainly as we go through the LGR process, we'll be able to include more there. But I suppose I'm coming back to, you know, I'm the Section 151 officer of Worcester City Council, so it's for me to report on the adequacy of our reserves, not necessarily some unitary that we don't know the shape or size of, or whether there's 1 or 2 at this point in time. But it's all public money, so it's making sure we're doing the best with that, you know, the residents' taxpayers' money now. And then Sean might want to add in more on the governance side of things, but already we are having additional reporting that we are doing on a formal basis through P&R on some of the specifics of LGR, so that members can understand the implications. We might not know all the answers at the moment, but it's about building that sort of awareness and that understanding as we go through the process. And certainly informal briefings with group leaders are taking place on a regular basis, just so that we can build everybody's awareness going forwards, and so that councillors can make informed decisions on the things that are going to be important to them as we go through. So it's the start. Capital 1 already in hand, the others it'll sort of depend on how we go through with the timing of the submission in November and then the announcement next summer. But happy to take any questions on specifics. Thanks.
Yeah, I was actually taking advantage of the silence there. I'll come back to Councillor Mace. I was going to ask about the recommendations, because they were noted and accepted, and when I initially read that, I thought, is that not something, are those recommendations not something that this committee should accept? But perhaps, having heard you just speak, maybe it's a lot more common sense than that. We need to see what the local government reorganisation looks like, so that then officers can make sensible decisions about how financial information is reported. It doesn't really need to be elevated to a committee discussion, because it's reporting financial information in a way that aligns with local government reorganisation. But when I initially read it, I did wonder whether it was up to committee to accept any recommendations from ASETs. Am I just barking up the wrong tree entirely?
So typically, and it's aligned to, I would say, all audit guises, that we present the recommendations and management provide a response, and then it would be for the committee to hold management to account in terms of implementing that recommendation. So the management response, as Rachel has said, was due to the timing of the issue of the report and getting it to this committee, is management's response that they have noted our recommendation and they would provide a fuller response in due course.
That makes sense. Yeah, you just needed that assurance that had been noted, and then, as you said, when we see what happens beyond November, we can talk about the detail about how officers will report to members of this council. Understood. Thank you. Councillor Mace.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. Having read it, I'm very pleased that we continue to deliver value for money, and that there are no statutory or key recommendations. I think, if anything, it shows that this council does provide very good value for money for our residents, and we could do more, not less, for people's money if the government could give us a settlement that would allow us to do that. I'm hopeful that we will get a 3-year settlement that will allow that, but we will see what happens. And I think in terms of the other recommendations, I did ask beforehand for an explanation of that, so I'm glad to already have it. I think some of the things that I'm aware of for slippages of things that have just been outside our control. So things like with the food waste, where obviously we have a capital project to buy new food waste trucks, and that's slipping because every council is trying to order them at the moment, and it's just going to take a long time for them to arrive. Isaac Magnet House is obviously, although we are the responsible body, there's discussions to be had with the county council over that aren't being resolved with the Scala. And the corn market. We spent a long time last year with a lot of meetings waiting for answers from the government about what that funding was going to happen. So there are a number of things that I think are outside of our control, and I assume in the end, that's worked out as a benefit in terms of our financial position, because we've had money sitting in the bank that we've then earned a fair amount of interest on. But I think in general, it seems like we've done a good job internally on managing those things. Thank you.
Councillor Hugo.
Thank you, Chair. Can you give us an idea of when you feel you will be able to form an opinion on our financial statements? Because it has been a concern for a while, hasn't it? Yeah.
So I'm actually going to use the terminology. Our ultimate backstop date for reporting on the 24-25 statement of accounts is the 28th of February 2026. So we will be reporting within that deadline because we have to. But we have actually been undertaking the field work now. So if we can come to a conclusion earlier than the backstop date, we will look to report earlier than that, given the work that we have been doing to date. But we will be reporting before the backstop date. In terms of the opinion, it will be for 24-25 it will still be a disclaimed opinion, because again we are going through the process of building back the assurance on the previous year's disclaimed audits to enable us to report and potentially lift that disclaimed opinion.
Supplementary. Yes, I understand that, and I think I understand why. Do you feel you will be in a better position in, say, just over a year's time to be able to do that?
So the process in a very high level or a simple level, the earliest we believe that we would be able to issue an unqualified opinion and lift the disclaimed opinion would be 2027, 2028. The reason being is there is a lot of work that needs to happen to build back that assurance, and we also need to have 3 balance sheets in order for us to do that. So the earliest, as I say, we could potentially do that would be 27, 28.
Thanks. I think that's going to be a bit tricky for us because we'll be moving straight into LGR round about the same time.
Yeah, it definitely does pose challenges because going back to the backstop dates, they will come down, so it won't always be February of the following year. And for 27-28, the date is the 30th of November 2028. And there is the potential for this council to no longer exist when we come round to be doing our audit for 27-28. And it is definitely a risk for the council, and it's a risk for us in terms of being able to deliver that audit in that particular year.
Okay. Thank you both. Any other questions, comments about the value for money report? Karen has travelled from Edinburgh to be here. Just saying. That's a testament to how good the report is and how good we are, I think. That's Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. On the financial sustainability, obviously all the accounts at the moment are sort of built on sand because we've had so many years when we haven't been able to finalise our accounts. And with slippage of programmes and so forth, we haven't spent as much as we expected to spend. Now, how is it possible to create really strong budgets, and talking forwards, and as we've created a budget this year that not all councillors could agree to because they had concerns, how can we create a really strong budget next year that everybody can sign up to?
I think I'll probably default to Rachel to answer that, Section 151 officer, if that's okay.
Thanks for that. No, I suppose, you know, I'm new to the organisation as well, and the first thing that you do is you come back and you look at those key controls that take place. So you refer to some of the work that Chris as an internal audit has done. You liaise with Kathy, you know, is the bank rec done? Is it up to date? Are there those suspense accounts? Are there big balances in there that nobody knows anything about? So you try and build assurance wherever you can on those sort of key areas. I mean, ultimately, how much money is in the bank? And then can that be accounted for by, you know, those other things? Given what the council is exposed to, although it's been a few years since there were audited properly accounts, it doesn't just change. It's not as though we've suddenly bought a number of companies or, you know, bought a shopping centre that might have a real impact on the scope and scale of our operations. So that also gives you a bit of comfort in terms of what's going on. There's certainly a lot of external funding, significant projects that are going on. But you, as I say, you work through the robustness and the controls that are in place on a day-to-day basis for authorising expenditure or letting contracts. And so that sort of gives you as much assurance as you can when the actual accounts are there. Setting a budget is always going to be difficult in the climate of funding reducing, and even where you've got authorities where the statement of accounts have been signed off by auditors for the last 10 years without any problems, it just tells you what your starting position is. As such, it gives you assurance that you have got those reserves that are there. It doesn't make actually the decisions about what funding you will have going forwards. It just tells you where you're starting from, which, you know, is reassuring at times if you got that from an auditor rather than just me and Kathy sort of saying that. So, you know, you have to put into perspective that the statement of accounts of what's in the past, what has happened, and setting the budget is about estimates of what we think future costs, income levels, and let alone knowing what the government will be giving us. And it's that timing of when that's available that we can throw everything into the pot together. And I suppose it's down to me working with the political groups, making sure everybody understands as much as they can do. They might not be happy with it, but that's not my role here, is just to present all of the recommendations and all of the options, and then politicians decide what suits their priorities best, I suppose. So I don't know whether that answers any of that question, but yeah, it's the best I could come up with, I'm afraid.
Yep. Councillor Mace.
I'll just make a quick comment on Councillor Barnes' point. I think the budget, if we do disagree on it, we disagreed on it last year, was all down to political choices. You know, in terms of the estimates and how we'd arrived at the numbers that were in the budget. You know, I don't think there's any disagreement across the room that our estimates are reasonable, and the financial monitoring report we had at P&R last week, you know, shows that our estimates are by and large correct, and you know, we'd be happy to you know, support the budget and how it's calculated. It depends on whether we agree on the political choices.
Okay, I can't see any other hands. I think we're drawing this one to a close, but just before we do, and just a reminder to myself, I've got too many tabs open. So, you know, we are simply noting this fantastically presented report about a fantastic council. But before we do, hopefully note the report, which is impossible not to do. I just want to draw attention to 3.2 in the covering report from Rachel, which kind of summarises the item, the value for money report, and it says, in relation to financial sustainability, governance and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, no significant weakness or key recommendations were identified. So that is, without wanting to undermine all the hard work that ASETs have put in at all, that is the core conclusion. So very positive. And within the report provided by ASETs, and it's not particularly related to value for money, but I want to highlight it nonetheless, it says, whilst we're facing financial pressures and the complexities of local government reorganisation, Worcester Corporate Peer Challenge Feedback Report 2025 highlights Worcester City Council's strong leadership, collaborative culture and commitment to delivering high quality services and inclusive growth. The Council was praised in the report for its strategic partnerships, regeneration projects and proactive approach to equality, diversity and inclusion. So take that excerpt from page 17, everyone. Share it at staff conference in November in particular, because people are feeling glum and they need picking up, which we talked about in a previous item. But it's great to see that in an external report. It's not just us saying it. Yes, we're going to note this report, hopefully. So all those in favour of noting the External Auditor's Value for Money Report 24/25. Fantastic. That's noted. And thank you very much, Karen, in particular, for coming all this way and for compiling such an extensive report. And thank you as well, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular internal audit progress report, which we bring to the committee, and it supports the committee in fulfilling its role in overseeing the work of the Council's internal audit function. It's covered on pages 65 to 77 in the agenda pack. It shows that good progress is being made. The service remains fully staffed. By the end of August, 135 days had been delivered against a full-year plan of 275. You've had one completed audit on the cyber security, and as highlighted earlier by Kerry, that's resulted in reasonable assurance, and I can confirm the controls that reported by Kerry were found to be operating during the course of the audit. The audit on the Local Government Transparency Code is at draft reporting stage, and we've also got work in progress on 8 areas which are set out on pages 73 to 75. That includes corporate credit card expenditure, environmental impact assessments and contract management arrangements. But overall, I'm pleased to say our plan is on track. I expect to deliver the Council's annual internal audit opinion on time for 2025-26. We've also got no real concerns in relation to implementing recommendations. There are 10 outstanding. That's a big reduction on 35 at the year end, 31st of March, and none of those 10 are overdue. Details of them are included in the internal audit reports, which are now in a shared member area, so they can be accessed by members as required. And I just confirm that at this stage in the year, there are no findings from our work which impact significantly on the annual governance statement for the current financial year. But other than that, it's all very routine and there are no proposed changes to the plan. Members are just asked to note the report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, any questions, comments about the internal audit report? Councillor Agar?
A question, more a comment, I suppose, which is 2.5. I mean, I think you made outstanding progress there by the look of it. So, you know, a lot of work's been done. Quite impressive.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Mace?
I'll just say thank you for the report. It's good to see the progress is continuing, and echo what Councillor Agar said about the reduction in outstanding recommendations is great to see as well. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I think the fact that we don't have many questions says it all, really. We're on track, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, and everyone's recognising that tonight. So thanks to you and the team. Yeah, perfect. Grand. Thank you very much. Short and sweet. All good. Okay. So next we have, oh, sorry, I should have done the formal, do we note it? But I was taking as read that we all note it. Let's make it formal. Do we all note the internal audit report? Yes, arms in the air. Thank you. Apologies. So yes, item number 8, Treasury Management. So we are to, before we dive into this one, we're going to note, hopefully, 24-25 annual report. And yes, in fact, I'll park that bit. I'll hand over to who's leading us. Rachel, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So under the CIPFA Code, we are expected, as good practice would be anyway, to report to this committee on the 24-25 Treasury Management. And also, because we're halfway through the year, we've given a little bit of an update on the 25-26 activity. Treasury management is basically us managing the cash flows in terms of loans and investments. It's all about keeping it secure, then liquid, and then looking at the yield or the return in that order is the way I see it. So in terms of where the council invests its money, it's very secure. It does it in the DMO, which is the Debt Management Office, so it's effectively the government. So, you know, it should be fairly safe. Liquidity, we only invest until we forecast we may need the cash again, so we don't leave ourselves short. And then yield, that's the last thought there. It's always good to have as much interest as we can do, or a dividend return, but it's about making sure it's secure and liquid first and foremost. As you can see there in the table in 3.1, as at the 31st of March 2025, our external borrowing, so those are our loans, reduced from 16.2 million down to 14.9 million. And that's just the natural timing of when some of these loans matured. During 24-25, there was quite significant different cash balances. So in paragraph 3.7, it sort of ranged between having £10 million available on one day up to £35 million, with an average of £25.5 million available at any point in time. We were able to secure a return of 4.86% on those balances. And that cash balance is there, as what we've mentioned previously. A lot of grants have been paid in advance of us actually needing to spend them. We were also sat on reserves, and there's also the healthy working capital in terms of us turning around the cash we receive quicker than when we actually have to pay that out. So quite positive news there in terms of just day-to-day activity. In 3.10, just to highlight, we do have £3 million invested in a property fund. Current valuation at the moment is 2.6 million. There is a statutory override that is eligible for public bodies or councils, so that we don't have to realise that £400,000 potential loss at this point in time. It's only if we actually divested of that investment would we have to actually acknowledge that. And you know, the whole point of doing the property fund a number of years ago was having a long-term view of the investment at that point. There's many more tables in there, but just to highlight in paragraph 4, which gives you a bit of a flavour of where we are on 25-26 activity. When the budget was set in February of this year, we estimated interest payments on external loans may go up to £574,000. That was based on the assumption that we might have to take out an additional external loan. And that's perfectly planned because we've got enough capital expenditure to allow us to borrow against that. But as it stands at the moment, our cash flow was a little bit better than what we originally thought in February. So we're just monitoring that. And if we don't take an external loan out, then that's less interest to pay. And that means our financial monitoring will be healthier going forwards. But there's nothing untoward if we did have to take that external loan out, because at the moment we are quite significantly internally borrowed in the terms of we're using our reserves and advances of cash to finance things. I don't think there was anything else I sort of particularly wanted to highlight, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I've got my own question, but I'll leave it for now. Just invite members, Councillor Barnes and Councillor Mace. Yeah, you first, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. The property valuation going down is a bit worrying in a climate where property tends to increase in value. We've got it from 3 million to 2.6 million. Are there any underlying causes for that, please?
There's nothing I'm aware of in terms of as a significant item. I will double check if there is anything and come back to you, but it's one of those things that it was invested upon as a long-term investment. We have external treasury advisors that have not said that we're in the wrong thing or anything like that. It's just one of those things, I'm afraid. I think it's sort of recovered from COVID times as well. So the valuation has increased recently compared to what it was in previous years. So it's not just suddenly happened in the last few months. It's been there for a few years.
Councillor Mace.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you talked about 3.5 and our internal borrowing. I had kind of a process question, because 3.5 talks about how rates for Public Works Loan Board loans have changed over the year. And presumably when we are looking at our large projects that we're going to be financing through borrowing, like the Ashford Crematorium, the business case that comes forward that has the loans in it at a particular rate. And while we have the money in the bank, we can internally borrow that and not actually take out a loan to complete that. But how does it change if the interest rates go up by 1%? Where does that report come into? Because obviously we approved it on a business case on a certain loan rate, and when we actually realise that loan, it may then be higher. So how does that fit together?
I suppose the honest answer is it's one of those things that you assess a business case. If it's only just sort of breaking even with the interest rates that you've used, you know that there's a risk or some sort of level of uncertainty. A lot of the time the interest rate is used there as illustrative purposes on that particular case. Wherever possible, you wouldn't never take out an external loan if you don't need to. You know, if you're sat on a lot of reserves, why pay any interest at all? But it's still worthy of noting the business case with an interest payment on there, because there is the opportunity cost. If you're spending it on capital, you haven't got it invested. So there will always be a disconnect at times, but it's about just managing expectations in terms of approving a course of action on that particular business case and the interest rates used.
speed in the report. Go ahead, Councillor Agar.
Thank you. Can I say thank you, Rachel, for answering my query so promptly on internal versus external borrowing, and I see that we're in a reasonable position. And it's very good to hear that the cash flow's improved as well. So it gives me a bit more confidence than I might have had. Thank you. I mean, the problem with Treasury issues is partly that the Bank of England tends to mirror the Federal Reserve, the US. And I mean, the only influences really we have much here are things like what inflation is doing. But so we don't have a lot of control necessarily over some aspects of our Treasury issues. But I think you've done quite well. You know, I'm quite impressed with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Agar. Any other comments, questions? I'm going to ask a question I've already asked you, Rachel, when we were preparing for this meeting, because I thought it'd be worth asking it in public, because I imagine people without your financial background might ask a similar question. And it relates to 5.4 on page 5. It said SIPFA, which I had it in front of me. What's the acronym stand for?
Chartered Institute of Public Finance Association.
Sorry, I'd like to explain that.
I'm not sick.
Yeah. Anyway, there's an acronym there, people. Sorry, I'm destroying the pace of the meeting. I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, that acronym, the Prudential Code, is clear. I'm quoting from the report. It's clear that local authorities must not borrow to invest primarily for financial return. Now, as someone without an accountancy degree, I thought, and bearing in mind the financial struggles that all councils are facing, I read that and thought, well, why not? Because you know, of all the points in history, surely this is the time when we should be investing in order to get a financial return so that we can fund services. And I asked, or made that point to Rachel, and Rachel kind of tutted at me really. And then you gave a really good explanation. I just thought it'd be worth you repeating it tonight.
Thanks, Chair. I think you've picked that up and it could be a big letdown now. But in terms of that, austerity started sort of 2010 and local authorities looked at all avenues and opportunities to generate additional income about commercialisation and things like that. And there are well-documented councils that have borrowed millions, potentially billions of money and they've been failed. And what this is about, you know, it's about investing in your local area so that there's an interest there. So councils can invest for regeneration purposes. So you might still invest in, say, a shopping centre, but it's part of a regeneration scheme. And then there's sort of low risk there. But you wouldn't necessarily set up an energy company expecting a return from that and, you know, borrowing large sums of money from the PWLB, investing them in that company and expecting a return. So that's why the code was sort of tightened in 2021, because there was sort of a relaxation and some councils got carried away. You know, at the end of the day, we're local authority officers. I'm an accountant, I'm not an investor. And how, you know, it's about operating in that professionalism, and otherwise I'd, you know, be down the City of London making investments there. So I think that was sort of the answer.
Thank you. Yeah, that was pretty much word for word what you told me. And then it says 5.4, the Public Works Loan Board loans are no longer available to local authorities planning to buy investment assets primarily for yield, unless these loans are for refinancing purposes. So there's a lot more caution since 4 years ago because of other councils showing that things can go wrong if you invest inappropriately. So I hope that tangent was worth it. I learned something anyway. Okay, so there's 3 recommendations, unless there are any other comments, questions, which I was going to read out at the start, but then I abandoned that one. So and it's up to the committee whether you want to take these all en masse or individually. I'm going to assume, unless someone says otherwise, that we'll take them en masse. So the 3 recommendations at the top of this Treasury Management report. First one is to note the report for 24-25. The second one is that this report that we've just discussed is then referred to full council for information. I think full council is in November, in accordance with the SIPFA Treasury Management Code. And recommendation number 3 that we've been asked to agree tonight is to note the latest 25-26 Treasury Management position. So are we as a committee okay with taking all 3 recommendations en masse? All those in favour? Perfect, thank you. Thanks again, Rachel. Wonderful, and I believe, and before AOB, we've got one more item, which is the Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report, 24-25, which has been led by Sian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say too much, just to note that you'll be delighted that this is a report to approve and not note. It is good practice for the work of this committee to be reported to full council. Although sometimes we meet ourselves coming back when we look back at the work plan of previous years, we look back at the annual governance statement, what the report does is reflect on, if you like, the ordinary business of the Audit and Governance Committee during the outgoing year and the items that it's taken a particular interest in, that you've had specific reports on where you've given officers a degree of scrutiny and challenge. So, yes, I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Otherwise, please take it as read. It's a summary of your work programme in the outgoing year.
Thank you. Any questions, comments about the report? Councillor Mace was just marginally ahead of Councillor Barnes there, so you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the officers who've worked on audit this year that have produced this good report that we're going to take to full council. I did just want to comment on point 1.2 in the report itself, background, that talks about the size of the committee and that the committee may recommend to council the appointment of one other person with particular skills that would be useful to the committee as a non-voting co-optee, so otherwise known as an independent member. I think that is something we should consider when we get to a unitary council stage. I'm aware at the moment everyone has a lot of work on and we probably don't want the extra work of appointing somebody at the moment, but that's something we should take forward. Because it was something that was recommended at the audit training I was on, and because I'm sad enough to read this, I did note that the County Council have an item on their next audit and governance agenda about appointing one, which does say that there is differing guidance requirements to be applied regarding independent members when sitting on an audit and governance committee. The committee may opt to not recommend an independent member appointment. For County Council purposes, there is no specific legislative requirement to have such a role, but key institutions such as the Institute of Internal Auditors, or the IIA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting, or SIPFA, which is why I knew it was accountancy because it was in front of me earlier, and as well as external audit promote such an appointment to satisfy industrial standards, it is seen as extremely good practice and it is seen as one of the pillars of good governance. Now, I know generally our reports have been that we have a good governance structure here, and I think that is generally correct, but I think it would be something to consider for the unitary committee, unitary authority going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mace. Any other comments or questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barnes, you did indicate, sorry, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. Really just to welcome the second bullet point in roles of the committee, that it now includes risk management systems. Because obviously we've taken on that role and it's good to see it in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Sian?
Chair, just responding to Councillor Mace's point, so when this report is referred up to Council, if the committee support Councillor Mace's view, then the committee can recommend that the City Council's position be, it would be beneficial to have an independent member added to this committee in preparation for reorganisation.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah?
Can I just ask on that point then, what sort of person would that be? A completely independent person?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've worked for a local authority before where there was an independent person on audit, and it is obviously a best practice recommendation that you do find in several sources. It tends to be somebody who has an audit or regulatory background, has the time available, has no other relationship to the local authority, and they normally have a relevant professional background or a work skill set previously. Obviously, we've got in a different context the precedent for an independent person involved in standards who tends to have a legal background. That's not necessary for this. It may be someone with a financial audit or governance background or similar. Given the work programme of the committee, it's not a huge commitment. It isn't necessary for the independent person to chair the committee, but to provide some scrutiny. And it is done fairly, not widely, but it is done elsewhere. So there are examples to follow. Whether you would have a stampede of people when you put an advert out for recruitment, I don't know, but it certainly is a trodden path.
Okay. I just wanted to reiterate thanks to everyone, Karen from Assets, Assets as an organisation, all the officers and members of this committee, as is listed in page 2 in the foreword that I wrote word for word, as we all know. I want to take responsibility for a typo in paragraph 5, because there is no one known as Shane Mark. As far as I know, work for this council. I believe that's meant to be, well, I know because I wrote the foreword, it's meant to be Shane and Mark, who, as you will of course remember, were absolutely amazing officers, and I wish they were still here. So yeah, that should read, I'd like to place on record thanks to Shane and Mark and all of you in this room. But yeah, I'm assuming with the lack of hands in the air or people eyeballing me that we're happy to approve the report. Bear with me again. Yes, the committee approves the report and that it be submitted to council. Oh, excuse me, Tatera. Council Tatera.
So I just wondered whether procedurally, if there was going to be a recommendation for an independent person, is that part of what goes to the full council on the back of this report?
Through you, Chair, because we're not proposing an amendment to our own constitution at this stage, it's not something full council needs to vote on. So therefore, I would just propose to add it into the covering report. That's if that's what you're all minded to support. That it's something that a point you don't want to lose sight of in preparation for reorganisation.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I'd like to at least a clear reminder of what the request was, and then we can take a vote on it, I'd say.
Well, I think I wasn't actually proposing to add one because I'm aware that we have a very busy work programme as a council and local government reorganisation going on at the moment, that it would possibly be a piece of work that we didn't need to do at the moment, and there'd be something to consider for the unitary. However, if the committee's minded that we should have an independent person, I'd be happy to support it.
Through you, Chair, I think what I'd understood it to be was obviously this local authority will be participating in designing a unitary, including proposals for the governance structure. And I understood what you were saying was to design the unitary to include an independent person on audit. So I think that's what we would be summarising in our report.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps it's an informal agreement. Unless there are any objections, we'll include that. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, 2 recommendations at the top of the Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report 24-25, that we approve the report and that we submit it to Council for information. So we'll take those 2 together. All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you very much. Thanks again, Sian, for the report, and to everyone for their hard work over the last 12 months. So I've not been notified of any other items for the meeting under AOB. Julian,
Could
no?
I just raise very quickly, whilst we're having a break, I did message Jessie Jagger because I was aware that she's not here and she sent apologies. Something came up which she had to deal with urgently and therefore she wasn't able to be here tonight.
Thank you. I hope it's all going to get sorted. Thank you. Yeah, apologies committee. I only noticed Councillor Jagger's absence at halfway through the meeting. Sorry, Councillor Jagger. So I inquired whether an apology had been received and obviously just heard the message from Julian. So we hope Councillor Jagger's okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for your involvement tonight and safe journey back to Edinburgh, Karen, tomorrow. And yeah, look forward to seeing you for the next committee meeting. Safe journey. Thank you.